Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to join me. And today I'm joined by specialist dietitian Lisa Poole, who is here to discuss her experiences with helping clients understand and navigate the difficult world of eating disorders. Lisa holds a bachelor's in science in nutrition and dietetics. That's easy for me to say, and has a diverse NHS background. The NHS, for folks that are watching this outside of the UK, is the National Health Service across surgical, paediatric, menopause and mental health settings. Lisa currently supports young people and adults with eating disorders, neurodivergence and complex mental health needs, with her approach blending clinical expertise with warmth, compassion and lived experiences. This is all shaped by both professional experience and personal insight. Lisa is currently working towards her master's in psychology to further explore the mind-body connection. Lisa has a deep passion for making nutrition meaningful to the overall human experience. We all have to eat, and it is really best if we do that safely. So I have to say, I'm really looking forward to learning more about this topic in general. We did have an opportunity to chat prior to recording, and I did learn quite a lot there, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation as we progress today. Lisa, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a lovely intro. Thank you.
It's all your work. It's all
I
your work.
know. You never realize, do you, until someone gives a bit of a background of how far you've come. You realize just how much
Absolutely.
you do. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you. So, as I like to do at the beginning of each interview, is just to give us a wee bit of an insight into your journey. I mentioned some parts of the journey there, of course, in terms of your practical experience, and inferred a wee bit of some of your personal experiences as well. You know, what brought you to your current specialism in eating disorders?
Um, I think the eating disorders was COVID time. My daughter was really struggling. I was a frontline worker because I was working in an acute hospital, and so she was doing online schooling at home. Sort of, I was checking in every now and again when I was coming back from working in an acute setting, and it transpired that she had an eating disorder. Being a dietitian, I was like, just need to eat, come on, let's eat, let's get some nutrition into you. You'll feel so much better. And again, because that wasn't my skill set back then, I had no idea that it was obviously the mental cognitions, the whole physical health aspect of it, body dysmorphia, the whole lot. So it was a real eye-opening moment. Thankfully, I was in the NHS and I was able to take time off to be able to support my daughter. And after that point, it made me realize just how under-resourced they are, how it is such a specialist niche. And I wanted to help other children, other patients in this difficult time.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned a lot of contributory factors there towards eating disorder. So forgive my ignorance if this is a silly question. That's kind of my job for most of the time on the podcasts. Is there such a thing from an eating disorder perspective? And I know that there are multiple different types of eating disorders. Is there such a thing as a natural path or a natural set of behaviours or patterns that are involved with an eating disorder that, now knowing what you know, having
Mm,
taken the time to understand it better and support your daughter through this, that there were some signs that were available to you had you not been
mm,
completely maxed out doing what you were doing in terms of
mm.
supporting COVID. But is there that natural path where you could maybe have that detection criteria set up a wee bit earlier?
No, it is one of the worst illnesses to treat. It really is. And predominantly, people don't end up being treated or being under care until they become quite unwell.
Hmm.
Um, it can potentially be like their physical health can be compromised, so they end up being admitted to an acute setting due to dehydration, potentially blood pressure, like the physical signs, so not necessarily the eating disorder signs, but physical signs. And then it tends to transpire that, oh, they're not eating, they haven't eaten for a very long period of time, they haven't drunk. And so that's how sometimes it can be picked up. Other times it can be picked up when if they're a bit younger and you've got the parents really concerned that the children are not eating. And so that can be flagged up, and then they could go down another avenue. With like adults, because they are more in control of their own well-being, they're
Yeah.
the ones that tend to go, like, get brushed under the carpet, because obviously they haven't got anyone else advocating for them, saying, I've noticed that they haven't eaten for X amount of days or drunk anything. But what we tend to see with all these individuals is that it can be linked to trauma. So it can be linked to bullying.
Mm.
It can be linked to neurodivergence.
Yeah.
It can be linked to a stressful point. So sometimes if someone is a sort of person that their appetite goes when they're stressed, that can link. And what we tend to see is that the boundaries keep moving. So they get to a certain point and then they're like, oh, actually, let's take this further. Let's see how much longer we can go without eating.
Mm.
There could be physical health complications. So if someone's got gastro issues, say like IBS, for example, and they're
Yeah.
playing around with their food intake and they're restricting food groups, again, there's those boundaries that they can keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they're restricting so much that they're eating that then it becomes linked to eating disorders or disordered eating. So there's so many different avenues. And again, it's not one size fits all. It just goes down to that individual, which is why I think it's so extremely difficult to treat, because you haven't got like a textbook that says look for X, Y, Z. It's looking at that individual.
Yeah. And that, I mean, even just hearing that from a relatively high level, it seems quite daunting.
Mm,
Literally, I'm thinking, where would you even start for that? I think I really understand the journey in terms of when someone is younger, if you're controlling the food, and I'll say that not in a
mm,
in a overbearing way, but you're the meal preparer, you're the meal server, and you put it down, unless you're paying zero attention and you have a dog around who's kind of, able to take
eat
the
the
scraps,
scraps. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and such like
Mm,
that, you would be able to tell fairly easily,
mm,
like you're not eating. Is it the
mm,
food in and of itself? Is there something going, and there would at least be some,
mm,
manifestation points to say
yeah.
that's kind
Mm,
of odd. Most of the trigger points that you mentioned there, Lisa, were mental.
mm,
And understand that if there's been trauma, there's been
mm,
bullying, there will be a physical aspect. There could be a physical aspect to
mm,
that in terms of, actual physical violence or such. My first ever understanding of such a thing as an eating disorder was watching a documentary about Karen Carpenter from the Carpenters many,
okay.
many, many years ago. So for most people, you might not understand who that is, but you can Google it and find out a bit more about it. And the way that they portrayed it in this, it was like a docu movie. It wasn't so much a documentary per
Okay,
se,
yeah.
and and they made a point of the physical aspect of how she
Mm,
was viewing herself when
mm,
she was looking at herself in the mirror. So
mm,
in the
mm,
mirror, as a casual observer of watching this movie,
mm,
I'm watching and saying, you look fine, or
mm,
some other,
yeah.
semi-complimentary, statement
Mm,
there. But what she was seeing was not what everyone else
mm,
was seeing.
mm,
How much, and I'm probably going to put you on the spot here in terms of a percentage, but how much is it mental? How much is it physical? Because I understand the physical probably would
mm,
still manifest itself in a
mm,
mental cognition of what you think you're seeing.
mm.
So how prevalent is the physical attributes of the person in terms of their ongoing management and
Mm.
ultimate diagnosis of that?
It's such a high percentage. I'd say it'd be over 80%.
Really?
So they've got like the body dysmorphia, and it's not only how they perceive themselves and how they look at themselves, it's also linked to the mental aspect of the
Mm.
eating disorder. So if it is that they've got anorexia nervosa, that is such a complex illness, to the point that a lot of people say that it's like the devil in their head, or it's like, a really negative, horrible friend. That when, like, as you say, you saw this individual as she looked okay.
Mm.
Yet, if someone went up to a person with an eating disorder, anorexia, and said, "Oh, you look okay," you've then got that mental cognition of that person's mental processing, the voices in their head saying, "They're lying to you. You don't look good. You need to continue to lose weight." And the way that they explain it when we do training is like, if you can imagine that you've got two people sat on your shoulders,
Yeah.
and you've got like the parent or the nice relative saying to you, "Come on, we're really worried. You're really losing weight quite quickly." And then they say, and then if you've got the eating disorder in the other ear saying, "They're lying to you. They're trying to break you. They're really trying to feed you false information. You need to continue our plan. You need to continue what you're doing." So when you put it in that context, the poor individual of what is going through their head.
Yeah.
So it is both. It's the visual aspect, it's how they think they perceive themselves with the body dysmorphia, but the
Yeah.
mental cognitions as well.
Yeah, it's so scary. I wasn't going to go here with the conversation today because sometimes it can feel a wee bit lazy, but where does social media play a part in this? And I'm not even going to box it into the influence it has on younger people, because it has an absolute influence
Mm,
on people of all ages.
mm, mm,
But when you're looking at the various social media platforms, and you have the models out there, and the people
mm.
living the incredible lives and such like that. Have you seen anything in your research or your trainings or your ongoing studies that links directly social media with the mental challenges that
Mm.
people start to face?
They're playing on their vulnerability, aren't they? You've got
Yeah.
these groups, and I know that there's a lot of dietitians that have gone to government, like the UK government, to ask them to put a ban on it, because it's so unhealthy. And it's like, as everyone knows, social media, you get your feeds, and the more you click on something, the more you're going to get exposed to that thing you've clicked on.
Yeah.
People are very clever now with, when they do these eating disorder pages, that to try and feed the negative into these individuals, they're wording them differently. So
Right.
instead of writing anorexia with the correct like letters, they're changing some of the letters for numbers, because the algorithm, or whatever software it is, it's beyond me, is not recognizing that it is linked to anorexia nervosa. So people
Right.
are still managing to dupe the system as such to be able to keep those groups going. Um, a lot of individuals, because they're potentially nutrient deficient, their energy levels are running low, it's easy to just sit and flick, and they get sucked in, and before they know it, they say like 4 hours they've been on just scrolling through images of girls, um, people like that have filtered themselves to make themselves look younger, so then they want to be like that, and it is so toxic. They say it's so dangerous.
Yeah. In terms of the training that you've done thus far, in
Mm.
that, does it include any of that, the ability to combat social media in terms of restricting access, in terms of, some sort of coping mechanisms to
Mm,
say,
mm,
this is fantasy, this is
mm,
actually not real, and we can prove it through
mm.
science and facts and data?
We can just say, obviously, as healthcare professionals, because when you work with like eating disorders, you work with a really big MDT, so you've got loads of other therapists. We will relay the same message. This is unhelpful. Try and limit your time in on the phone. Try and look at other things. Block those algorithms if you can. Um, get the parents on board if it's the children, with the adults. Sometimes it's even so drastic that you say to them, take social media off your phone,
Yeah.
and explaining to them the rationale. Can you see how unwell it's making you feel? We've got to be seen to be advising this, because again, it isn't having a negative impact on the individual. And as you say, the coping mechanisms, people are turning to it to make themselves feel better, and it's feeding into the eating disorder. They don't realize it is. So we can't go to the lengths of saying, I'm taking it off your phone, I'm banning it. All we can do is we can advise, which is why the dietitians have gone to the government to say, look, stricter things need to be done. And I think, if I am correct, I think it's been taken off of TikTok. I think there's been a ban on TikTok
Really?
for eating disorders. I don't know whether there's any loopholes now that they've managed to get around that, but there was some breakthrough.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult thing to do. Technology is
Mm,
moving so quickly.
yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about this morning, I was out doing my morning run, and it was just one of those runs where it was just more difficult than I
Bless you.
expected it to be. And it wasn't,
Mm.
in the moment, I was kind of really wishing for the end. Whereas, and that's like,
Mm,
honestly, I tell you, Lisa, that's like, 1.5% of the time that I run, and I run quite a
okay.
lot.
Yeah.
So this morning was just one of those times, and then after I finished and I'm doing my little cool down walk, I thought, I'm absolutely delighted that I did that. I'm
Mm,
delighted that I finished that, and I feel great. And I feel great every single time I work out doing anything about
mm.
anything, specifically for runs, especially the more difficult ones. And then I started to think about social media. I have no idea. I wasn't even thinking about social media this morning, but how many times would someone sit and scroll and get
Mm.
lost in the scrolling,
Yeah.
and then afterwards have that euphoric feeling that you get, when the endorphins are running and such, to say, I accomplished something, I achieved
Mm,
something, I really broke through a barrier, I
mm.
pushed myself, look what I'm doing for myself. How many times would someone get that with social media? Most of the
And
time, I imagine they don't even remember what they looked at,
no,
you know?
no. And I think if anything, they more than likely feel worse than what they did when they started scrolling
Exactly.
because all that
Exactly.
negativity. And
Yeah.
it's so clever how people do it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just, and even though they're most probably potentially not 100% focused on that, even the scrolling, they're still absorbing some of that like
Exactly.
exposure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't
Yeah.
imagine. I think they're
Yeah.
more than likely, as I say, come off even more in a lower mood than what they potentially were feeling before they went on.
Yeah, the reason I mention that today is maybe that's something that can be offered up to anyone who's
Mm,
listening, or potential future patients of yours, to say, just between now and the next visit, tell me,
yeah.
just catalogue the amount of times that you did a scrolling,
Mm,
session, and you felt better afterwards.
yeah.
There might be the odd time you find a funny, where you're
Mm,
like, oh, that's a funny thing, and that's cool. How often is that? And
mm,
maybe take it forward. So I wanted just to switch gears a wee bit, and there's a couple of things I want to talk about, but one is, obviously there's a hardship that's being experienced by the patient, by the
mm,
person who is going through this. And if there is such difficulty in diagnosis and treatment and ongoing support, and you
mm.
know that's very, very difficult for the patient in and of themselves to see a clear path
Mm,
towards, I'll say, getting better, and that would be, in inverted commas.
mm,
But there's obviously wider impacts to that in terms of their community, their
mm.
social structure. As a parent who has actually lived that, and I talked about that briefly during your bio, what was that journey like for you?
It was horrendous. It was absolutely awful. I think going back to the beginning, so initially she was self-harming. And again, it's one of those ones that I've been advised that that is a mask of another illness. So she
Right.
was expressing herself with the self-harming. And again, I could sense that her mood was really, really low. And again, as a parent, it would be, are you okay? Excuse me. How how are you doing? And she would be like, yeah, I'm fine, just brushing it off, going back to her bedroom as teenagers do. Excuse me. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I respect your privacy. That's it. And then it was just one day, she just absolutely broke down and she said, I've been cutting myself. And the cuts were all up the arms. Like you can see that she'd been doing it for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I just like broke down and I ran around the house in a rage, grabbing every sharp item going because I was just thinking, how can I have let this happen? The guilt had sunk in.
Yeah.
Every form of sharp item I just got and I hid away. My husband was in tears. We were just like, we felt like we failed. How did we not read the signs? And myself as a healthcare professional, how did I not read the signs even more? So then when we had that, we were sort of referred to the appropriate healthcare professionals. Then in their skill set, they started asking questions and they said, actually, we think your daughter's got an eating disorder. And I was like, no, I'm a dietitian. She hasn't. And the man actually said to me, no, I think she hasn't. I think we need to get her in quite soon. And I turned around and I said, can I just have a couple of weeks, to try and like speak to her and see how things are going on? Well, then as time went by, I didn't get the time to speak to her. And a letter comes through the post, one of those ones, like if you don't take up the appointment, they say, sorry, you're discharged. And I
Mm.
was like, oh my God, actually, this is real. I really need to act on this. Well, then as soon as I acted on that letter, we went full speed through treatment. And it was a complete eye opener. It was meal plans, planning food, distraction techniques. So for my daughter, for example, for dinner was very regimented. We had to all sit at the table. We weren't allowed to speak. She had to have the telly on. She could watch the telly. She would eat in 10 minutes. It was like a really quick job. She ate her dinner and then she had to be taken out on a drive as a distraction because her diagnosis was is that she had anorexia nervosa. So she would restrict right the way through the day. She would then binge in the evening and then she would purge.
Yeah.
So after her dinner, because that was a big meal and it potentially one of her only meals that she had during the day, she would normally try and take herself up upstairs to purge.
Yeah.
And so the recommendation was to take her for a drive to distract her, try and give it as an opportunity to speak. So every night after dinner, I would have to take her for an hour's drive. Now, if she ever asked me for a drive, like years down the line, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't bear doing a drive because it was just like, like the whole thing, like the tense atmosphere, the trying to find a different route so that she could have different scenery. Oh, it's tough going, tough going.
Yeah.
She had relapses. And when the relapses came, your heart sunk again because it was like, oh God, here we go again. So it's such a difficult time, not only on the individual, but the whole family, normality, jobs, hobbies. It just has such a big impact that you do not realize until you're in that moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in terms of the treatment that she was receiving, was it, I think I am assuming it would be because she was a kid at the time,
Mm.
but it was inclusive of the family. So you and your husband got some supports throughout this as well.
It's quite limited, and again, in the UK, resources are so limited in eating disorders. It's such a challenging area that the skill set of people is so challenging. So we were given recommendations by CAM, so Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services in the UK. They were absolutely brilliant. They were a really, really good team that we had. But I know that unfortunately, that's not the case for a lot of people around in the UK. So,
Yeah.
with that respect, we had a brilliant network of healthcare professionals. But it was meal plans. You had to plan meal plans. You had to sit with her while she was eating so that she didn't hide food, get rid of food. You had to make sure that she was eating. You had to make sure that she wasn't having any compensatory behaviors like over exercising or trying to vomit. So you had to have eyes in the back of your head. And my husband, and again, I can see it with a lot of men in families now working in that. The men find it really, really difficult because it's like their child. How is this happening to their child?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have the nurturing side like the mums do, or as much of a close connection in these situations. And my husband was he felt like, a separate entity. He was just like, I have got no clue. He did not realize the extent of it. And it was just, luckily we had support, like peer support with other families that were going through the same situation, that actually made him realize, oh my God, we are going through this. We are actually on this roller coaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has such a major impact. It really does.
Absolutely. And where do things stand today for you?
So my daughter, so this was like about 5 years ago. My daughter was diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago. And again, in my line of work, seeing it now, we tend to see that people that are neurodivergent, because they don't know what's going on in the headspace, they don't know why they're feeling like they are, they tend to express it in another form.
Yeah.
And so I was advised that my daughter's eating disorder was potentially all her mixed emotions. She was expressing it in this way because she did not know how to cope with it. So
Yeah.
it's like a coping mechanism as such. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so since her diagnosis, her eating, it can be up and down. It's not a plain sailing, but she's so much better. So much better. So,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
great to hear. That's
yeah,
great to hear.
yeah.
And as you said, mentioning the relapses there,
Mm,
there's nothing that's absolutely linear,
no.
nothing that's going to give you exactly, a predictable path towards
Mm,
recovery. There's going to be squiggles, there's going to be dead
yeah.
stops, there's going to be complete different paths taken and such. And I'm glad you mentioned the ADHD. You mentioned neurodivergence being a
Mm,
contributory factor
mm,
in the beginning, and obviously alluding to that there. Is there any research out there, or any findings out there that has an absolute correlation between a neurodivergent diagnosis and the potential for other manifestations to that? Obviously,
mm,
anorexia or eating
mm.
disorder being one.
It's still quite early days, isn't it? And I know, like, there's all this talk now of neurodivergency and a lot of people getting diagnosed, but the link and the correlation between them and the mental health aspect is still early days. It's
Yeah.
really, there is loads of interventions and loads of studies, but again, it's new things keep like popping up as such. So again, with the neurodivergency, like the autism aspect of it, that's they're very sensory, and their food preferences. So for example, if they had a vegetable that was cooked with two different textures, they would not be able to tolerate that.
Mm.
And that flips into disordered eating as such, of something called ARFID. So their diagnoses are getting missed again, because there's so much overlap between all the neurodivergency that there's no set in stone as to whether it could have been that triggered it, or whether it was something else, or whether it was an anxiety because a child was having to go into a noisy dining room at school, and that affected their sensory issues, that reduced them to eating. It's such it's such a minefield. It really is. And as I say, it's early days, so there's not enough evidence to suggest what is the one thing that's actually, you know, affecting these individuals.
Yeah, the chances are it's probably not just one thing, as you
No.
were alluding to there as well. So, in terms of the overall, as a parent, or a caregiver, or an adult that has some level of responsibility for for children and such, is there anything that you would recommend, or anything that's commonly recommended for people who have had experience of that, to say these are some telltale signs that you might want to do a bit further investigation? These are some
Mm.
typical behaviors that would warrant a follow-up and a series of questions, or a medical referral
Mm.
or such.
I think if you, like with a child, with a parent with a child, if you are at all concerned that, they're not eating, they're skipping meals, they're looking quite drawn, quite gaunt, they're, that they're withdrawing from normal life activities, then I'd go to the GP. I would start off, it's always the starting point to go to the GP.
Hmm.
So just starting that process, it could be nothing. It could be a blip. It could be that they've got something, stressful times at school like GCSEs or exams. Um, but it's always good to get it checked. If you have got your reservations or you've got any concerns, go to the GP.
Yeah.
They can start the ball rolling if there is any concern. They've got the skill set to ask certain questions, um, and then they would do the referral on to the appropriate service. Like with an adult, a relation or a partner, again, if you're seeing that they're withdrawing, they're not their self, they're starting to lose interest in food, socializing, their mood is dipping, again, speak to them and see if they can go to the GP, go with them, get the support, but don't ignore it, because the longer it's ignored, the harder it is to get the appropriate interventions to start supporting them.
Yeah, habits. I could imagine habits, forming relatively quickly and
Mm,
sticking,
yeah.
like
Mm,
habits tend to do. And such, yeah,
mm,
such a, as you say, such a minefield
mm,
of experiences that the different people who are involved are
yeah.
likely to be having at
Mm,
various points. And then when things start to compound or build on top of each other, it can become all the more confusing because you don't know exactly what it is you're actually talking to anymore. Is it the self-harm?
mm,
Is it
mm,
the stress? Is it the actual food in and of itself? Is it the experiences they're having, the sensory experiences? And it can
mm.
become quite overwhelming. So consult medical professionals, talk to the adult, in and of themselves. Don't go to Google. Don't go
No,
to the AI. No.
Dr. Google. No, no. Again, I don't know how strict it is now with eating disorders with Google.
Yeah,
Um, I've never done it, to be honest, so I don't know what it would give you if you did search eating disorders. I know, again, in the UK, there are a lot of platforms. So in the UK, we've got something called Beat, which again supports and gives scientific evidence. You've got other charities that can support, and all of these platforms are science based, they're evidence led. So if it was that someone went to social media and typed in, I need help with an eating disorder, they're going to get the neighbor saying, oh, yeah, try this or try that. So,
yeah,
yeah, always seek professional advice if any you are concerned. They can point you in the right direction. And if they haven't got that skill set, they can refer you on to the appropriate clinicians. It's such a complex, challenging illness to live with that it's not a case of just visiting your GP and, you know, prescribe some medication, job done, that's okay, they'll be fine.
yeah.
It's not that easy.
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned earlier that you're pursuing your master's in psychology.
Yes.
Was that in any way inspired by the experiences you've had thus far?
Yeah. I think with myself, so with dietitians, we are very clinical. So we are very much a bit like, when they sort of like joke and say, like, the doctors with their bedside manners, very direct, very to the point, very clinical.
Yeah,
Dietitians are like that. And we're trained at university with our skill set of going through like the same pro formas as such, like asking weight, asking bloods, asking background history. So it's very direct. And in eating disorders, it can be quite intimidating.
yeah,
Um, so I've been very fortunate that I've worked with family therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and because they're more therapeutic, more holistic, the way that they work and the way that they were getting more answers and more information, I was like, actually, this is going to really, really work well alongside my dietetics.
yeah,
It's just the wording, being able to like read the room better as such. And just getting more than just a one word answer. I was like, I really need this. So yeah, that's I'm doing the psychology to complement my dietetics, so that I can give that more all round holistic approach to my clients.
yeah. Seek the answer, be beneath the answer, as you say.
Yeah,
Even if it
yeah,
is one word, the
yeah,
answers. So I'm going to try this one more time. Your dietetics. I got the word. I
yeah.
nailed
I
it
know.
this time, which is
I
great.
know.
Look what happens when we practice. And that's a vision for you and your practice is to provide a more holistic experience to people
Yeah.
that they don't have to go and seek help from multiple different health professionals.
So when you're supporting a patient or a client with eating disorders, it's better to work as like what they call like an MDT, so a multidisciplinary team. So the fact that
Right.
you've got either a GP or a doctor, psychiatrists, um, nurses, therapists, so that you're offering that wraparound service
Yeah.
because it's not, as I say, it's not just about the eating, it's not just about the medication.
Yeah.
You can get family therapists that can come in and support the family. So again, like as I said, with my husband, he really struggled with my daughter. If we were offered a family therapist, it would have supported him in the whole family dynamics.
Yeah.
Um, so you've got all these amazing skill set of people that can offer that wraparound service. And the more that can support an individual, the better approach it will be for potentially a better outcome and moving forwards to recovery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic service overall. So, Lisa, this has been fascinating, quite a heavy conversation, to be honest, but absolutely fascinating to just, peek under the covers, so to speak, of the experiences that
Mm.
people can have. And as you said earlier, you had no idea about any of this. And why would
No,
you?
no.
If your life journey hasn't
Mm.
taken you in that way. As you know, this podcast is called The Best You, which is to give people an opportunity to strive to be the best that
Mm.
they can be. What's one regular practice that Lisa employs to give you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself?
So I think, as you've most probably noticed, I like being on the go all the time. I'm constantly like doing stuff. So it might not be downtime, but my husband and myself love doing house renovations.
Right.
So I just absolutely love doing a house up. So decorating, I find that that's my therapeutic space.
Yeah.
So before I trained as a dietitian, and when my kids were younger, I did an online interior design course. So
Mhm.
I love making use of that and like designing a whole room, and like
Yeah.
it's like building a picture up, I suppose, but with an actual room. So that's my downtime. That's my time. So yeah.
Fabulous. Years and years ago, my very first job when I left school, I was a as we call back in the UK, a painter and decorator.
Yes.
And here in North America, it's typically just called a painter. And and I got it because you didn't need any qualifications to be a painter, and that was absolutely
Bless you.
commensurate with my academic path at the time. And I came from a bit of a family structure that basically said you leave school, you get a job, you
Yeah.
stay in the job, and you just work.
Mm.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
So I just fluked into the job. After a very short time, realized this is absolutely not what I want to do. But what I've done subsequently since, as you reflect back, kind of like you did when I went through your bio, you sometimes
Mm.
forget what you did, and I almost now have, and this could be just out of convenience, quite frankly, but I almost now have the reason that painting, I could have done labouring, I could have done
Mm. Yeah.
bricklaying, I could have done a whole bunch
Mm.
of different things.
Mm.
But one of the things that I think I was really drawn to when I used to do it was the ability to finish something, quite
Yeah.
frankly, and you would be able
Yeah.
to see it and say, we did that.
Yeah.
This is a finished product, where
Yeah.
the type and style of work that you do, the type and
Mm.
style of work that I do through my
Mm.
coaching practice, you sometimes don't get to see the end result.
No.
You're a
No.
part of the journey, and
Mm.
you don't get that fruition at the end. So
Mm.
I can absolutely really
That makes
resonate with
sense. That
what you're
so
saying.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
So
complete satisfaction of actually finishing something and
yes.
like seeing that you've done that is
Yeah.
just that's what fills me with joy. So yeah.
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 Yeah. That's excellent. Fabulous. So Lisa, before I let you go, where can people find out more about you and your practice?
So I'm on social media at Precision, another challenging name, Precision Dietetics, or I have a website www.precisiondietetics.co.uk. So
Yeah.
yeah, if anyone has any questions, they can drop my email addresses on there, so they can drop me an email. There's chats on there, so yeah, feel free to just message.
Fabulous. Excellent. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I've
Thank
learned
you.
a lot, and all the very best with the remainder of your masters.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me.